In a small coffee shop tucked away on a busy street, Clara stood behind the counter, counting her tips from a long day of work. The bell above the door jingled, announcing the entrance of a customer. Clara looked up, her tired eyes finding a young man, maybe in his late 20s, with a scruffy beard and worn-out jeans. He carried an air of nonchalance, but there was something unsettling about him. His eyes darted around the room, and for a moment, Clara felt a chill run down her spine. Clara asked, keeping her tone professional. The man approached the counter, leaning forward like he was about to share a secret. Clara turned to prepare the drink, but noticed something peculiar. A few customers nearby were watching intently, their eyes flitting between the newcomer and Clara, whispers starting to ripple through the crowd. As she poured the steaming chocolatey mixture, her instincts kicked in. She glanced back at him, and the uneasiness returned, wrapping around her like a heavy blanket. There was something in his gaze that made her skin crawl, a sense of danger hidden beneath a playful grin. "Actually, on second thought, I'm sorry, but I can't serve you," Clara said, her voice steady but filled with determination. The man's eyes narrowed and the atmosphere shifted. "There's something off about you," she replied. The cafe fell silent, tension thick enough to cut with a knife. The man laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I can and I will," Clara insisted, feeling a strange bolt of confidence surge through her. His jaw clenched, and for a moment Clara feared she might have pushed him too far. The laughter faded, replaced by a dark seriousness. Clara's heart raced. She could feel the burning stares of other customers, each one silently weighing the situation. "Fine," he said tersely and turned to leave, each step echoing with anger. The door swung shut behind him, a whoosh that felt like a release. Clara stood frozen at the counter, her heart still pounding, adrenaline coursing through her veins. As she took a deep breath, the murmurs around her began to rise again. One woman whispered, "I can't believe she did that," a man added, shaking his head. Clara felt a mix of relief and unease. She had stood up for what she believed was right, but at what cost? Just when she thought the tension would subside, it grew thicker. A friend rushed in, eyes wide with urgency. "Clara, you won't believe this. That guy is linked to all sorts of bad stuff." The words hung heavy in the air, settling in Clara's stomach like a lead weight. She suddenly realized how close she might have come to danger, and yet it didn't feel like a victory. The thrill of being brave was mixed with a cold fear that won't go away. Hours passed, the cafe slowly emptied, and Clara cleaned up, the shadows growing longer outside. Yet she kept replaying the man's face in her mind, how easily he had smiled, how quickly it changed. What was it about him that felt familiar yet off? Just as she was about to close, a shadow passed the window. Heart racing, she glanced outside, but it was just a figure walking by, almost comforting in the normalcy of it. As she turned to lock the door, she heard it, a soft murmur, a collective gasp almost. In a nearby alley, voices were hushed, awed. "Did you hear?" The words sent chills racing through her again. That name echoed, whispered in wonder, and her gut twisted. She quickly found herself peering out the window. She strained to see if the young man had returned, but the alley was empty. As night fell, she gathered her things to leave. She stepped outside, and the air was thick with the aroma of rain, the world shimmering under the streetlights. Yet an unsettling knot formed in her stomach as she walked to her car. But was it fear or was it intrigue? The next days blurred together. Stories from customers merged with local gossip about the young man. Each time her heart raced in recognition. They were all talking about the same man. Days turned into weeks, and still she could not shake the memory of him. What had she done? Clara started questioning her gut instinct. Sure, she had protected herself and possibly her customers, but could it be that she had turned away someone who might have changed her life? One evening, while scrolling through social media, she saw a picture of him at an event, arm in arm with a local celebrity. Clara felt a strange mixture of anger and admiration. They painted him as some sort of outcast while they adored him anyway. Was she wrong for refusing to serve him, or was she right for trusting her instincts? Riddled with confusion, Clara decided one final thing. She had to know more about him. It was time to dig deeper, time to unveil the truth. A few days later, she found herself at the local community center, where he had recently helped overhaul the place. She watched people talk about him warmly, sharing how he quietly made changes that helped so many. It was a side of him she never knew. As she listened, she heard his name again, whispered in awe. He's given so much to everyone. Clara's heart raced. She had refused to serve a man who was actually trying to do good. The realization stung. Everything she thought about him shattered bit by bit like glass. Finally, she built up the courage to ask someone about him. She ventured gently to an older gentleman sitting nearby. The man smiled kindly, revealing warmth that was now suddenly familiar. He's misunderstood, that's for sure. Not everyone sees the full picture. He helps without wanting credit, but people can't get past their fears. Clara nodded, processing his words. Her initial instinct had been a warning, but how easily had she let a moment of fear cloud her judgment? That night, Clara searched for him online, finally finding his contact information. With shaky hands, she drafted a message. "Hi, I'm Clara. I am the barista who refused to serve you." When she pressed send, a tight feeling settled in her chest. What if he never replied? What if he didn't want to? But the next day, a message popped up on her screen. Hi Clara, thank you for your message. I appreciate you reaching out. Some people misjudge, and that's okay. It was simple, but a wave of relief crashed over her. How could a man who had been so misunderstood be so generous? They arranged to meet at the coffee shop where she worked. Clara felt nerves dance in her stomach as she prepared. What would she say? Would he be angry? When he walked in, the atmosphere shifted again, but this time it felt different, heavy, but charged with possibility. Clara recognized him immediately, but this time it was different. She felt an eagerness to hear his story. Clara, he greeted, a hint of nervousness in his voice. Thank you for coming, she replied, grounding herself. I wanted to apologize again for my actions that day. He smiled gently, but his eyes held the weight of understanding. It's all right, I get it. I have a history and people like to make assumptions. I just come from a rough patch. Clara felt the warmth grow between them, a strange connection blossoming from their shared experience. She asked, genuinely curious. Yes, it was tough, but I started getting involved in my community to turn things around. His sincerity touched Clara deeply, peeling back layers of her own prejudice. In that moment, she felt a bond, a sense of respect growing. Then he leaned forward like he had a secret to share. You know, your refusal that day saved me from making a bigger mistake. The word struck Clara hard, leaving her speechless. It was a twist she never expected. She had thought she had him all figured out, but here he was, showing her another side of himself she hadn't seen. As the evening unfolded, they spoke at length, weaving stories both heavy and light. Clara learned about his struggles, his goals, and how he was working to change perceptions. At closing time, when every chair was upturned and the last cups washed, Clara felt a sense of transformation. Destiny had conspired when the door had swung shut the day she refused him service. This wasn't just about fear or misunderstanding. This was about growth, about connection. They were both pieces of a bigger puzzle, people forever learning to see beyond fear, to find empathy in the most unexpected places. When he walked out that night, Clara knew it wasn't the end, but a new beginning. They exchanged smiles, knowing this was only the beginning of their story. And she could finally breathe easy, not just as a barista, but as someone who chose to see beyond the first glance, finding hidden worlds where hope could thrive in even the darkest circumstances. In the dim light of a small coffee shop, nestled between bustling streets, Clara felt a sense of familiarity. The hum of conversation offered comfort, but today, something felt different. The bell above the door chimed, and Clara looked up, her heart skipping a beat. And walked a man, tall and rugged, with an aura that seemed to draw all eyes to him. He looked calm, yet there was something unsettling in his demeanor. As he approached the counter, the atmosphere shifted, thickening like the steam rising from the espresso machine. He asked, his voice smooth but tinged with something darker. Clara's fingers paused over the buttons, hesitating. She could feel a tension in the air, an unspoken warning. She studied him for a moment, the way his eyes flickered around the room, scanning, searching. Just behind his confident smile, there seemed to be a restless energy, something more than just caffeine cravings. Actually, Clara said, her voice steady but firm, I'm sorry. His smile faltered, turning to confusion. I can't. Clara's heart raced as she spoke. There was something primal about trusting her instincts, something deep inside telling her that this decision was for a reason. An awkward silence enveloped them, punctuated only by the muffled sounds of clattering dishes and murmured whispers from the other customers. People were watching now, glancing from her to the man, eyes wide with curiosity, disbelief. He said, incredulity rising in his tone. Yes, Clara replied, her hands shaking slightly as she wiped them on her apron. His expression shifted, the charm melting away into something menacing. This is ridiculous. You're judging me based on. Just a feeling, Clara insisted, summoning every ounce of courage. With a curt nod, the man stepped back, glancing around the room as the tension thickened in the air. Was his irritation boiling over? Clara could feel her body tensing as though she were a tight spring ready to snap. You'll regret this, he spat before turning sharply on his heel and storming out, the bell jangling behind him. The room buzzed to life once more as conversations resumed, but Clara felt staggered. Had she made the right choice? She leaned against the counter, her heart racing. Her bravery felt fragile, and yet it was empowering. I can't believe you did that, a customer whispered, eyes darting toward the door. Me neither, Clara replied, her voice barely a whisper. As time ticked by, she tried to shake off the feeling of unease, yet the murmurs continued. Another customer said, lowering their voice like a secret. He's been linked to some shady stuff. Her stomach twisted. Had she really just refused service to someone dangerous? Maybe it was intuition that had guided her, but doubt crept in like an unwelcome guest. She wanted to stand tall in her decision, but began to feel a heavier weight of doubt. The next few days passed slowly. Clara couldn't shake the memory of that man's face, and the whispers around town only fueled her anxiety. Stories of his supposed exploits became more frequent, and she often heard his name spoken in hushed tones filled with awe. He helped several charities, a woman said, recounting a tale of good deeds. But no one really knows him. A ghost indeed. Clara felt haunted by her refusal, a nagging regret clawing at her. It was hard to ignore the thought that by cutting him off, she may have missed out on something important. What if she had misjudged him? One evening, as she closed up the shop, she overheard a pair of customers at a nearby table whispering fervently. Their eyes sparkled with intrigue, and their voices carried a mix of admiration and disbelief. "You know, he's supposed to be brilliant," one of them exclaimed. Clara's heart tightened. The word seeped into her consciousness, swirling in a mix of confusion and curiosity. She couldn't let it go. What if the man she had turned away was changing lives while she remained in her little coffee shop? The following day, there he was again, as if summoned by her thoughts, but this time he wasn't alone. There was laughter and light around him as friends gathered near his table. Clara felt an ache in her chest as she watched, anxiety mingling with fascination. Her instincts screamed to stay away, but her heart longed to understand. As she washed mugs, she overheard bits and pieces of laughter mixed with stories of success. "He really is something special," she heard one woman say. "Just wait until the gala next week." Clara's heart raced. A gala. The event was rumored to be the biggest charity fundraiser of the year, yet the fact that this man would lead it set her mind spinning. The conflict brewed inside her. Was he the villain everyone spoke of, or the hero she hadn't seen? Days turned into nights, and finally the night of the gala arrived. Clara, unable to quell her curiosity, found herself volunteering as a server. Perhaps she thought if she could see him in action, it might give her the answers she craved. As she served drinks, she spotted him, all dressed up in a sharp suit, engaging the crowd with charisma that radiated warmth. He commanded attention, laughter, and kindness poured from him as he worked the room with grace. Not a ghost, he was vibrant and full of life, and Clara couldn't take her eyes off him. Something in his presence shifted her perception. This was not the man she had encountered in the coffee shop. This man was powerful, passionately engaged in the lives of others, bringing light to them, lifting them up. And then it happened. In the midst of her serving, she heard whispers filling the air. "It's incredible what he's done. Everyone feels inspired by him." Clara felt a knot tightening in her throat. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Was she really so quick to dismiss him? The man she had refused service to was changing lives, and here she stood, mere feet away. Suddenly he turned, catching her gaze. For a heartbeat, time seemed to still. There was recognition in his eyes. Had he seen her too? Clara felt exposed under his gaze, a mix of embarrassment and awe colliding within her. Just as she steeled herself to approach him, a group of admirers engulfed him. Room buzzed with admiration as people clamored for his attention, each eager to engage, but Clara didn't move. Instead, she watched as he deftly handled questions and praises. A son among planets, a sense of urgency welled within her. She had to confront her past decision, had to find out who he truly was beneath the surface. Later that night, with the gala winding down, Clara found her chance to speak with him. The crowd thinned, and there he stood, finishing up a conversation with an older gentleman. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, her heart racing. "Excuse me," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. He turned, recognition flickering in his eyes. "I'm Clara from the coffee shop," she said, every word carrying the weight of her previous decision. "I'm really sorry for what happened. I judged you too quickly." His expression softened, and for a moment it felt as if the world around them faded. "I appreciate you saying that, Clara. It takes courage to admit when we're wrong. We all have layers that go unnoticed." The connection was electric, as if they both floated in a new understanding. A shift had happened, not just in her perception of him, but in their shared humanity. They were two souls, learning to see beyond the first impression, seeking the truth that lay beneath. "Genuinely thought I had to protect myself," Clara confessed, her voice tinged with vulnerability. "But I realize now that fear can cloud our judgments." His smile grew wider, and there was a kindness in his eyes, one that spoke of forgiveness and understanding. "Thank you for being brave enough to come speak to me." The room slowly filled again, laughter and conversation bubbling as the gala drew to a close. Clara felt a sense of warmth enveloping her, hope blossoming in the space between them. They shared stories. He spoke of struggles, his desire to change lives, how easy it had been to get lost in misconceptions. He mused. That simple phrase echoed inside her, striking a chord deep within. Clara realized that in refusing him service out of fear, she had also missed the opportunity to be part of something greater, to learn and to grow. As the night stretched on, Clara felt a connection that transcended their past encounter. They were no longer just a barista and a customer. They were allies, two people trying to understand their world's complexities. Hours later, as the gala finally wrapped up, Clara felt invigorated. She learned that sometimes the most profound lessons arise from our misjudgments. Stepping outside into the cool night air, Clara glanced at him, a sense of newfound courage emboldening her. His laughter caught in the air, rich and genuine. "I'll hold you to that, Clara." And as they parted ways, Clara felt a weight lift. This wasn't just the day she had refused him service. It became a moment of discovery. In that instant, she learned that the beauty of life often lies in the most unexpected encounters, where judgment fades and understanding emerges, whispering through the chaos like a soft breeze. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon in a small coffee shop, a place where familiar faces came to seek warmth and community. Clara wiped down the counter, her thoughts drifting between the rhythm of the espresso machine and the steady drumming of raindrops against the window. She loved the way the shop felt during stormy weather, cozy, alive, a bubble separate from the chaos outside. But that comfort shattered when the bell above the door jingled, signaling a new arrival. Clara looked up to see a man enter, his dark hair tousled and clothes slightly damp from the rain. He stepped inside, shaking off droplets like a dog fresh from a swim. For a moment, Clara felt a shift in the atmosphere, a heavy tension in the air. Something about him stirred an instinctive caution, prickling at the back of her mind. She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Yeah, I'll take a large mocha," he replied, his voice smooth, almost charming. Yet there was an underlying edge to it, something that made Clara's skin feel tight. As she turned to prepare the drink, she noticed other customers glancing toward him, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and confusion. Clara's instincts were honed from long hours behind the counter, a protective vigilance that came from working closely with people. She couldn't shake the feeling that this man was not who he seemed. With each second that ticked by, a sense of urgency gripped her. She turned back, her heart racing. "I'm sorry, but I can't serve you," Clara said, her voice firm. He blinked, taken aback for a moment, then his expression darkened. "What do you mean you can't serve me?" "I just can't," Clara replied, her mind racing. "Something feels off. I trust my instincts and they're telling me to." His laughter rang out harsh and insincere. "You're refusing service based on a feeling," but Clara held her ground. "I understand it sounds strange, but my job is to keep my customers safe." The cafe grew quiet, all eyes on them, the tension palpable. People shifted in their seats, the hushed whispers circling like a heavy fog. Clara felt a bead of sweat slide down her back, but there was a rush of adrenaline too. She was standing up for her gut feeling, for her safety and that of others. His jaw tightened, and for a fleeting moment she saw something flicker in his eyes. Anger, frustration. Clara stepped back slightly, sensing his anger brewing just beneath the surface. "Fine," he said through clenched teeth. And with that, he turned and stormed out, the bell jingling a final, almost mocking farewell. Clara stood there, heart pounding against her chest. What had just happened? Her bravado wavered as she glanced at the other customers, who were now muttering amongst themselves. One woman whispered, incredulous. A man added, shock evident in his voice. Clara felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. Had she done the right thing? As she cleaned up the counter, her thoughts swirled. What if he really was a dangerous person? Or worse, what if she had misjudged him completely? As evening fell, the rain softened to a drizzle and the cafe slowly emptied. Clara folded her apron, still haunted by the encounter. But something deeper churned within her, an unsettling sense of dread mixed with a bizarre thrill. Days passed, and the story of the man she refused began to spread. Whispers of who he was surfaced throughout the cafe, weaving a tapestry of curiosity and intrigue. "Did you hear? He's involved in some shady dealings," one regular claimed while sipping his coffee. "Yeah, I heard he helped turn that charity around last year," a woman added, eyes bright with gossip. Each day, Clara absorbed these conversations like a sponge, her heart tugging in conflicting directions. A part of her felt justified that her instincts had been right, but another part, deeper and more curious, ached with the knowledge that she might have refused someone truly remarkable. It was on a particularly quiet Sunday that Clara first saw him again. He stood just outside the coffee shop, his tall frame silhouetted by the light, a group of people gathered around him. They were laughing, his magnetic energy drawing them near. It was as if he was a star and they were the planets orbiting around him. Clara's curiosity pulled her closer, her heart racing with a strange mixture of fear and fascination. She heard his name whispered among the crowd. "He's back to help with the fundraiser," someone said excitedly. Clara's heart sank. How had she turned away someone who was evidently working for change? She caught bits of the conversation, each glowing compliment wrapping around her like a chain. Confusion twisted in her mind. This was the same man she had sent away in a rush, and now here he was, revered and respected. What had she done? As the people dispersed, her instinct pushed her further. She had to confront what had happened to seek out the truth. Claire walked out to the sidewalk, suddenly aware of her own vulnerability. Could she speak to him, look him in the eye after turning him away? The man turned, surprise flickering across his features. Recognition dawned, but it was quickly replaced by a guarded expression. Clara stammered, gathering her thoughts. "I'm Clara from the coffee shop. I wanted to apologize for what happened the other day." The cool exterior softened, and he regarded her quietly for a moment. "I appreciate the apology, Clara." His words landed heavily between them, a reminder of their charged encounter. "I know it was rash," Clara admitted, the sincerity in her voice palpable, "but I trusted my gut, and to be fair, I was having a rough day," he replied thoughtfully. Emotions can change a person's demeanor completely, but that's the thing, isn't it? The breath caught in Clara's throat as realization hit her. Here was a man who had faced judgments just like hers, and yet stood resiliently in the face of it all, a true embodiment of resilience. They shared a glance, and in that moment something shifted. "I know the whispers," he continued. Before she could respond, he turned back toward the crowd, where people began to gather again, eager to soak in his energy. Clara stood back, taking it all in. The way he commanded the room, how effortlessly he inspired others, it all sank in deeply. This was no fleeting encounter, it felt significant. On that rainy day, she had refused a potential ally, a light that could have guided her through tougher times. Instead, she had insulated herself with fear, and here stood this man, pouring both his heart and soul into helping others, a stark contrast to her own moment of judgment. As the evening progressed, Clara watched him interact with everyone. The more she observed, the clearer things became. He was not just a man, he was a beacon of hope. Clara's heart warmed, her earlier fear fading as admiration took hold. What could have been and what was moved into focus, blending into an uncharted path she could explore. That night, as she lay in bed, Clara reflected on everything she had learned in such a short span. It was not just about one refusal. It was a lesson in empathy, understanding, and the power of confronting one's own biases. She picked up her phone and sent him a message. "Thank you for what you do," she typed, heart racing with anticipation. "If you're ever back in my cafe, let me serve you." The reply came quickly. "I'd love that, Clara." A spark of excitement coursed through her. This was about more than just coffee. It was a doorway into understanding each other, a chance to grow together. Clara felt empowered, realizing that real growth often stands on the foundation of vulnerability and connection. As time passed, their paths crossed more frequently, from coffee chats to deeper conversations that challenged their perspectives. Every encounter deepened their bond, layer by layer, like intricate brush strokes blending into a beautiful painting. And so, Clara learned that the world is rarely black and white. It taught her about the beauty that lies hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be discovered through daring to see beyond the first glance. On days when the rain came pouring down, she often found herself reflecting on that fateful moment. The initial refusal had sparked a journey, one that reminded her time and again to keep her heart open and her mind curious. Her small coffee shop remained a sanctuary, now filled with whispers of hope, change, and daring connections. Clara embraced each new day with the understanding that sometimes the most meaningful paths appear unexpectedly, shaped by choices we never thought we would make. And through it all, that one rainy day became a cornerstone of her life, decisions teaching her that in the complexity of human interactions, there is always power in seeing the whole picture. Just beyond those first impressions, true potential awaits. The rain pelted the window of the small coffee shop like 1,000 tiny drummers, creating a soothing rhythm that danced through the air. Clara stood behind the counter, arms crossed, watching the droplets race down the glass. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with a hint of cinnamon from the pastries warmed the cozy space, wrapping it in a comforting embrace. It was one of those days when the world outside seemed far away, and all that mattered was the steaming cup in hand. As she wiped the counter, the bell above the door jingled, pulling her attention to a new customer. In stepped a man, soaked from head to toe, shaking off the rain like a dog. He was tall, with unkempt hair and a rugged appearance that suggested he had seen his share of life's storms. Clara felt a chill run down her spine as their eyes met. Something about his gaze was unsettling, a flicker of something she couldn't quite define. Clara asked, masking her unease with professionalism. "Yeah, I'll take a large Americano," he replied, his voice deep and smooth, but something in it sent alarm bells ringing in Clara's mind. As she moved to prepare his drink, she could feel the eyes of the other customers turning toward the man. Whispers began to swirl around the room. Clara's instincts kicked in like a warning light, urging her to act. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him than met the eye. Then something snapped in her. Maybe it was the rising tension in the room, the way he looked at her with an intensity that felt almost predatory. Clara turned back to face him, her heart pounding. His expression morphed from surprise to confusion and then anger. "I can't explain it, it's just a feeling I have," Clara replied, her voice more confident than she felt. "Based on what? You don't even know me," he shot back, irritation creeping into his voice. "Exactly," Clara replied, standing her ground, "and that's why I can't serve you." For a moment, silence enveloped them. The tension in the air thickened, wrapping around Clara like a vice. "Fine," he said, his voice dripping with disdain as he stepped back. With that, he stormed out, the door slamming behind him. Clara stood frozen, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Moments later, whispers filled the cafe, eyes darting from her to the door. She felt exposed, the weight of judgment pressing down on her. A voice gasped from a nearby table. Her cheeks burned. Days of serving coffee had conditioned her to handle unruly customers, but this was different. Had she made a mistake, Clara couldn't shake the reminder of his piercing gaze. As evening fell, the barista's world shifted. Clara washed her hands in the sink, lost in thought. Maybe she should have just complied, given him the benefit of the doubt, but she shook her head again, reminding herself that she needed to protect herself and her customers. Moments later, she heard her colleague sigh. "Clara, you did what you felt was right," he said, reassuring her even as doubt gnawed at her gut. The next day passed in a blur of coffee orders and small talk, but Clara couldn't shake the memory of the man. Whispers about him had spiraled through the cafe, each story more shocking than the last. He had a reputation, they said, and not a good one. "Rumor is he's been in and out of trouble," said a man sitting in the corner, his voice low. With each new piece of gossip, Clara felt her unease return like a tidal wave. Had she come too close to someone dangerous? Meanwhile, the weight of the decision burdened her and she found herself questioning her actions. Perhaps he wasn't merely a rogue figure. Days turned into weeks and the stories about him piled up, painting a portrait of a man who was both feared and admired. He helped turn that community garden into a thriving space, one customer said. Clara couldn't get him out of her mind. What had she turned away? As she stood in the cafe pouring coffee for yet another regular, she felt a sudden urge to know him better. It was always the uncertain ones that intrigued her most. One afternoon, she overheard a regular talking animatedly about him, and the words rang out like a bell. "I saw him at the charity gala last night," the man chuckled. People were whispering his name like he was a celebrity. Clara's heart raced. Here was proof that what she had dismissed might actually be something profound. The whispers she'd heard weren't mere rumors, they were echoes of lives he had touched. It brought a strange sense of warmth. A few days later, Clara found herself volunteering at that same charity gala, hoping to piece together the man she once turned away. The venue was bright and teeming with life, decorated with twinkling lights that captured the essence of festivity. She bustled around serving drinks, her heart pounding with anticipation. Would he be here? As she moved through the crowd, she caught sight of him. There he was, radiating charm and confidence, interacting with everyone. He was not the man she had seen that rainy day in the cafe. He was animated, laughter spilling from his lips, weaving stories as if he were casting a spell. Clara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The contrast was stark. How had she made such a quick judgment? She watched as a child approached him and his face melted into a kind smile. He knelt down, listened intently, and handed the child a small toy, eliciting a delighted squeal. This was a man who spread joy, not fear. Suddenly, whispers flitted through the air. "He's an incredible speaker," someone said. Clara's heart sank again. What had she lost by refusing to recognize his potential? She felt drawn to him in a way she couldn't ignore. She wanted to understand, to learn more about the man behind the facade. The more she took in, the more she felt her own judgments cracking, pieces falling away to reveal a desire for connection, not distance. Later in the evening, as the gala began to wind down, fate intervened. Clara found herself in a quieter corner, her heart racing. He walked up to her, the crowd now just a whisper behind them. "Hey, you're from the cafe." I sparkled with recognition. "Yeah," she replied, a mix of surprise and hope swelling in her chest. "I wanted to say I'm sorry for that day." His smile widened, warming the space between them. "You took a chance based on your instincts. I've heard a lot about you since then," she admitted, her voice steadying. It was the first step she needed, a bridge woven from vulnerability. He nodded, genuine understanding in his eyes. It's easy to get lost in stories that don't tell the whole truth. The connection deepened in that moment, a fusion of two paths that had crossed in a fleeting instant. Clara felt the chains of her earlier judgment break away, replaced by a growing sense of curiosity and empathy. She ventured, her heartbeat quickening. "What drives you?" His gaze softened as he considered her question. "I think we all have a choice. We can hide in darkness or seek to illuminate the path for others." Clara felt a surge of respect swell within her. "That's powerful," she whispered. Just then the crowd roared, a wave of applause vibrating through the room. He turned, glancing back at the gathering. "Looks like the night isn't over yet." As they made their way back to the crowd, Clara understood this wasn't just about the gala. It was a moment of reconciliation. She had turned away from fear and stepped into the light of understanding. They moved through the gathering, engaging in conversations, laughter flowing effortlessly between them. Clara felt herself begin to transform, her world expanding as she learned more about his efforts, not just as stories retold, but through collective hope. As the night folded into itself, Clara found herself wanting to know more about him, about the good he was cultivating, about hers. She had begun to glimpse the complexity behind that man, layers of humanity that offered rich conversations and newfound relationships. Several weeks passed, but Clara never forgot that evening. The man, the one who had seemed so shadowy, became a thread woven into the fabric of her life. With each encounter, he shifted something inside her, a realization that trust is often born through understanding, and that fear can blind us to extraordinary possibilities. One afternoon, she noticed him lingering around the cafe again, but this time she approached with a newfound courage. He greeted her with a warm smile, the door to their connection forever opened. She asked, her heart steady. "I'd love that," he said, his eyes bright with kindness. As they stepped inside, Clara knew this wasn't just about coffee anymore. This was a moment that had the power to spark change within both of them. A realization blooms sometimes. The path to understanding is paved with mistakes, but from those very missteps, the most vibrant relationships can grow. And as they stood together, the world outside faded away, and two souls began to intertwine, building a new story that moved beyond first impressions, breathing life into the winding road of their shared humanity. In that moment, Clara knew they were forever changed, woven not just into a community, but into a rich tapestry of understanding and connection, one that welcomed each twist and turn. It was a typical rainy afternoon in the small town of Maplewood, a chill in the air that sent people scurrying for shelter. Clara stood behind the counter of her favorite coffee shop, the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the room. The shop was warm, its cozy familiarity wrapping around her like a hug. She wiped the counter, watching the rain pelt against the window, forming rivulets that blurred the world outside. Just as she settled into her routine, the door creaked open and in walked a man. He was tall and rugged, his clothes soaked through from the downpour. For a fleeting moment, Clara felt a jolt of recognition, but it quickly faded. She turned her attention to him, a friendly smile on her lips, but as their eyes met, she felt a chill seep into her bones. Something about his expression felt off, as if he carried a storm within him. She asked, trying to rid herself of the unease creeping in. "Yeah, I'll have a large Americano," he replied, his voice low and smooth, but there was an edge to it that made Clara's gut twist. As she turned to prepare his drink, she noticed the other customers glancing nervously at him. She could feel the tension in the air, heavy and unwelcoming. The atmosphere had shifted, and Clara's instincts kicked in hard. "Actually, I'm sorry, but I can't serve you," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. He blinked, taken aback. "What do you mean you can't serve me?" "I just can't," Clara insisted, her heart racing. The room went silent, a thick blanket of disbelief wrapping around them. Clara could feel the weight of curious eyes staring at her, and she felt exposed. He spat, his expression twisting into something dark. "I trust my intuition," Clara said, her voice shaking but resolute. The man's demeanor shifted rapidly, anger flaring in his eyes. "You'll regret this," he said, his voice cold. Then he turned on his heel and strode out, the bell jangling behind him like a sinister farewell. As the door swung shut, the cafe buzzed back to life, whispers filling the space. Clara stood there, a mix of adrenaline and doubt coursing through her veins. Had she made the right call? Would she be feeling this way if the rumors were true? "I can't believe you just did that," one customer murmured, shaking her head. "Maybe," Clara replied cautiously. But as she tidied up, doubt gnawed at her. The line between intuition and judgment felt murky. She tried to shake it off, but the man's piercing gaze lingered in her mind like an echo in an empty room. Days passed and whispers about the man swirled around town. Some said he was involved in criminal activity, while others spoke of his efforts to help reform the local youth center. The conflicting accounts painted a picture she couldn't ignore. "He's a ghost," a barista from another cafe said one evening. With each story, Clara felt a strange pull growing within her. Had she turned away from someone truly remarkable? She couldn't stop thinking about him. The moments leading up to the denial replayed in her mind like a film stuck on repeat. One rainy evening, she overheard two customers at a corner table speaking in lowered voices. "I heard he's been helping kids in trouble," one of them said. The words crashed over Clara, washing away her previous doubts. Could it be? That same man standing in her cafe was out there changing lives while she had stood, rooted in fear. The realization shook her to the core. As her thoughts swirled like the storm outside, Clara knew she had to confront what she had done. She had to learn more. The following week, she found herself volunteering at the local community center, drawn by a force she couldn't explain. If he was connected to this place, she needed to discover why. The center was alive with laughter that day, kids running in all directions, excited energy crackling in the air. Clara felt a sense of purpose wash over her. It wasn't long before she spotted him. He was in the corner, crouched low, listening intently as a group of kids shared stories about their day. The way he engaged with them ignited something within her. She moved closer, captivated. He wasn't just involved, he was genuinely committed, pouring his heart into them. The kids erupted in cheers, their faces glowing with excitement. As she watched him, Clara felt the weight of her earlier judgments crumble away. He was nothing like what her gut had warned her about. In that moment, he was a beacon, shining light onto the faces around him. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to confront the storm of her anxiety. Just as she approached, their eyes met. There was a flicker of recognition and surprise, but he didn't shy away. His voice was warm, inviting. "Yeah," she replied, feeling nervous but determined. "I wanted to apologize. I was wrong to refuse you that day." He looked thoughtful for a moment, the warmth in his eyes unfaltering. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong. The sincerity in his voice struck her. She felt as if the ground beneath her was shifting, opening a door she never thought would be there. In that moment, she understood how important it was to look beyond first impressions. "I've heard amazing things," Clara continued, her heart racing. He smiled, that same genuine glow lighting up his features. "I'd love to share. It's about giving kids hope, you know." Clara listened intently as he explained the initiatives he had taken to help local youth. Each word resonated, a confession that sounded almost like a prayer. It was clear his past didn't define him. He was actively rewriting his story. "Who you are doesn't dictate who you can become," he said, the conviction in his eyes firing her imagination. As they continued to talk, a connection was woven tighter, deeper. She realized his journey had mirrored the very values she cherished: resilience, compassion, and redemption. They shared laughter and stories late into the evening as the kids returned home, the sense of community throbbing in the background. Weeks turned into months, and Clara found herself drawn back to the community center regularly. The more she got to know him and the work he did, the more she was inspired. They became partners in planning events and fundraisers that began bridging the gaps in the community. His name began to resonate in their small town, whispered in tones of admiration. Did you hear about the gala? Customers would say, their faces alive with excitement. But with that admiration came challenges, too. Some old rumors resurfaced, fueling whispers of doubt. Clara could see how they tainted the public image he had worked hard to build, echoes of judgment that threatened to cast a shadow over his light. One day, while prepping for the upcoming gala, Clara found him sitting alone, staring blankly into space. She asked, moving to sit next to him. He sighed, running a hand through his hair in frustration. Sometimes it feels like I'm fighting against a tide that just doesn't want to change. Clara felt the weight of his vulnerability sink in. You're making a difference every single day. There was a pause, thick with emotion. You understand, don't you? I do, she said softly, her own experiences bubbling to the surface. His eyes softened. As the gala approached, Clara felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that while the whispers of doubt might never fully disappear, they could never take away the light that was kindled within their community. She worked diligently alongside him, confident in the difference they could make together. The night of the gala arrived, filled with suspense and excitement. As guests gathered in the beautifully decorated hall, Clara could feel the energy in the air, the hope, the passion, the promise of something new unfolding. As he took the stage to address the crowd, Clara stood at the sidelines, her heart racing. The moment he began to speak, the room fell silent, every face turned toward him. Thank you all for being here tonight, he began, his voice steady, infused with raw emotion. Clara watched as he shared his journey, the struggles, the redemption, the community's strength. Each word echoed like a drumbeat, relentless and powerful. The audience reacted, captivated as they leaned in, spellbound by the connection he fostered. Clara's heart surged as she felt the collective energy in the room, an unspoken agreement to move forward, to look beyond the past, to embrace their shared humanity. When the evening came to an end, applause erupted in the hall, drowning Clara in a sea of support. Whispers of his name filled the room, but this time they were surrounded by a wave of admiration, not fear. After the crowd dispersed, he made his way to Clara, his face radiant. We did it, tears welled in Clara's eyes. You created this, you showed them who you are. He took her hand and held it tightly, his grip affirming the bond they had formed, one born out of vulnerability, trust, and transformation. In that moment, she knew they had forged something more meaningful than just friendship. They shared a mission to illuminate the shadows, to lift others as they continued on their path. As they stood together, the echoes of their past mingled with the whispers of hope for the future. Clara realized then that sometimes the hardest moments can lead to profound connection and growth, ones that change the course of lives, her own and many others. In the quiet that followed, she understood that every decision, especially those born from fear, could ultimately open doors to incredible possibilities. Hand in hand, they walked forward into the night, ready to embrace the ever-unfolding story of their lives together. The bell above the door jingled as Clara stood behind the counter of her small coffee shop, lost in thought. It was a typical gray afternoon, the kind that coaxed people inside to escape the chill. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mingling with the sweet scent of pastries. Clara wiped down the counter, glancing out the window at the rain-soaked streets, watching as passing cars splashed through puddles. Then the door swung open, and in walked a man. He was tall and had an aura that sent a shiver down Clara's spine. His clothes were disheveled, and his hair was unkempt, trailing water like a curtain behind him. But it was his eyes that unsettled her, dark and intense, filled with a depth that suggested hidden turmoil. Clara asked, forcing a smile as her heart quickened. I'll have a mocha, please, he replied, his tone casual, but there was an undercurrent, a tension that prickled in the air. Clara turned to prepare his drink, but something stopped her. Why did he feel so off? She could sense the room shift, the air thickening as other customers began to glance over. Clara's instincts flared up. Years of working in this cafe had sharpened her ability to read people, and everything about this man raised alarms. His brows furrowed, confusion swiftly turning to irritation. What do you mean you can't serve me? No, it's not that. Something just feels wrong, she replied, her heart racing as she attempted to stand firm. He pressed, the challenge in his voice cutting through the cozy atmosphere of the cafe. Clara felt the weight of the other customers' gazes, their disbelief palpable. Yes, I am, and I know it sounds strange, but I have to trust my instincts, she said, leaning into the tension, trying to emanate strength. He laughed, but it wasn't an easy laugh. It was tight and strained, fast fading to annoyance. Exactly, Clara replied, pushing the words out with conviction. With a harsh glare, he turned to leave, the door swinging shut behind him with a definitive thud. Clara felt the air rush back into the room, oxygen filling her lungs after holding her breath. Customers began to murmur again, whispers swirling around her like a sudden storm. A woman asked incredulously, wide eyes darting from the door to Clara. I can't believe you turned him away, another customer muttered, shaking his head. Clara felt her cheeks flush under their judgmental stares. Had she made a terrible mistake? Maybe he wasn't dangerous at all. After all, maybe he just looked like someone who had fallen on hard times. Maybe you should have given him a chance. A whisper floated from the corner table, drowning her in self-doubt. That night, as Clara closed the cafe, her stomach twisted tightly. The weight of her decision pressed down on her like a sack of stones. She replayed the encounter over and over in her mind, the man's expression, the anger in his voice. What had she been thinking? Had she misjudged him? Days turned into a week, and Clara couldn't shake her curiosity. She overheard conversations about him, vague snippets that fanned the flames of her worry. He's been involved in some serious trouble, one customer said. Another chimed in, but he also volunteers at that youth center. Clara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Could that same man who had stood in front of her with wild eyes also be trying to change his life? She started to feel like a walking question mark, torn between defending her instincts and wanting to know more. The following Saturday, she found herself wandering through the local park, her mind still wrestling with the encounter. And there he was, the same man, standing beside a small group of kids. He was laughing, playing a game, his earlier tension completely dissolved into laughter. Clara paused, her heart bewildered. He was a different person now, animated, filled with an energy that drew people in. The kid pulled on his shirt and he bent down to listen, offering encouragement and high fives. Clara could feel herself soften, an unexpected warmth blooming in her chest. The contrast was striking. Here was a man who embodied life and laughter, not the anger and defensiveness she had encountered. But then she heard it, a quiet murmur from nearby adults whispering, "That's him, the one from the cafe." Her heart dropped, the lingering judgments mixed with curiosity. Wouldn't they see the same spark of hope that Clara saw? Suddenly she felt exposed, standing on the edge of a decision. As she turned to leave, she caught his eye. He paused mid-laugh, surprise washing over him. "Hey," he called out, waving her over. Clara hesitated, caught in a whirlwind of self-doubt. She wanted to turn and run, to hide, but there was something about his voice that pulled her in. He said brightly, flashing a grin that lit up his face. With a hesitant step, Clara approached. He shrugged, still smiling. "And you're a great role model," Clara replied, her voice steadier than she felt. The appreciative light in his eyes was unmistakable, and Clara felt the static of misunderstanding begin to fade. Her words trailed off. He nodded, the grin softening into something more genuine. "It's a work in progress." Something in her chest thudded, a connection ignited between them. "I'm sorry for the way I reacted the other day," Clara confessed. "You weren't alone in that," he said, his tone thoughtful. "People see what they want to see." As the kids continued to play, Clara listened intently as he opened up. He spoke of his past, the mistakes that had led him astray, but also the people who brought him back. Each word felt like a strand weaving their respective stories together, a bond forged not just by their encounters but through real emotions and shared experiences. He asked suddenly, curiosity flickering in his eyes, "Because I realized that maybe I let my fears speak louder than my sense of empathy." He smiled, and Clara felt her heart swell with a strange mix of hope and relief. Maybe this was a moment worth embracing, a chance to rewrite the story they were both part of. After that day in the park, Clara kept coming back, blending her life with the youth center where he worked. With every interaction, she learned more about him, the passion he held for these kids, the way he lit up whenever they succeeded. But it was clear there were still shadows lingering in the background. Clara began to hear whispers again, the old rumors resurfacing. "Did you see him at that fundraiser?" The uncertainty began to creep back in, wrapping around her like a familiar blanket. She saw him struggling to battle the ghosts of his past, always fighting against an image that threatened to drown him. One evening, as they prepared for another youth event, she found him staring out into the distance, lost in thought. "Sometimes I wonder if I can really make a difference," he said, voice barely above a whisper. Clara moved closer, her heart aching for him. "You are making a difference. You can't let other people's perceptions define you." He tilted his head slightly, contemplating her words. But what if the whispers never stopped? In that moment, Clara understood that this was their struggle, his yearning to be understood and her desire to support him. "You're more than what people say," she replied, conviction spilling from her lips. "It's about what you choose to do now." Weeks went by, and the community began to see him for who he truly was. The changes he made rippled out like waves. Clara felt joy in the transformations happening around her, kids thriving, learning, and growing. But with each success came new challenges. The rumors turned harsher, and with them, the shadows he had fought against loomed larger. There were days when Clara could see the uncertainty creeping into his smile. Then one Tuesday morning, word broke that he had been retaking steps toward his old life. It sent shockwaves through the community, each wave a reminder of the fragile trust that had started to build. Clara felt her heart sink. She decided to confront him again, her determination fueling her courage. "We need to talk," she said, finding him sitting on the steps of the community center, staring blankly ahead. He asked, his eyes dull, "I heard the rumors." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck, the weight of the world pressing heavily on him. "It's complicated," she urged, desperation creeping into her voice. "You can't let the past define you." "I know," he replied, looking defeated. "Then let's make it matter." For the first time, Clara could see the flicker of defiance in his eyes. "You're right." As days turned into weeks, Clara and the man poured their energy into change, both for the youth and for themselves. They organized events to raise awareness about the struggles faced by at-risk youth. Each moment shared became a testament to resilience, a shared bond of lifting each other up in their darkest times, and slowly something began to shift. The community started to embrace him, admiration replacing judgment, and Clara felt a rush of gratitude. At the next fundraiser, Clara stood at his side as the audience erupted into applause, a standing ovation for a journey that had barely begun. As the cheers echoed around them, she looked at him, a smile dancing across her lips. She said softly as crowd roared. He nodded, his heart swelling. As the evening drew to a close, Clara was overwhelmed with pride. They had all fought against stormy tides, yet here they stood together, fortified by their struggles. And as she listened to the whispers of admiration around her, Clara knew she had finally broken through. That once terrifying man, now transformed by resilience and understanding, was no longer defined by fear, but celebrated for strength. From that moment on, they continued to forge a new narrative, reminding one another that the most beautiful stories come from triumph over adversity. Together, they created a ripple effect that extended far beyond their small town, echoing with hope, courage, and the undeniable truth that sometimes the real transformations happen within. The bell above the cafe door jingled, a cheerful sound that usually comforted Clara. But that day, the moment she heard it, an uneasy feeling washed over her. And walked a man, soaked from the rain, his hair plastered to his forehead. He seemed out of place, chaos trailing behind him like a shadow. Clara paused, wiping her hands on her apron, a strange mix of curiosity and wariness bubbling inside her. She asked, forcing her voice to sound calm. He approached the counter with a casual air, but there was something about his eyes dark, piercing, that sent a chill down her spine. "I'll have a large caramel latte," he said, his voice smooth but edged with a certain tension. Her instincts flared to life, telling her something wasn't right. As she turned to prepare his drink, she caught sight of the other customers. They were watching him closely, their expressions a mix of suspicion and curiosity. Clara swallowed hard, trying to shake off the growing sense of unease that wrapped around her like a tight shawl. She focused on crafting the drink, but couldn't stop glancing back at him. There was a heaviness in the air, almost palpable. It was as if the universe itself was holding its breath. His brow furrowed in surprise, his confident demeanor shifting swiftly into confusion. He asked, his tone laced with disbelief, I can't," Clara replied, the words tumbling out before she had a chance to second-guess herself. He stepped back, anger sparking in his eyes. "You don't even know me. Sometimes you just have to trust your gut," she replied, feeling her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. The cafe fell silent, the atmosphere thickening with tension. It was an electric moment, the kind where everything felt amplified, as if the air itself was crackling. Clara could sense the crowd's judgment hanging over her, their gazes like tiny knives. He let out a harsh laugh, his facade slipping into something darker. "You'll regret this," he shot back before turning to leave, the bell chiming sharply behind him. Clara stood frozen, her heart racing. What had just happened? A wave of relief washed over her, yet it quickly dissipated, replaced by doubt. Had she done the right thing? Whispers erupted among the patrons, curiosity swirling like a storm. One woman gasped, another voice chimed in, "He doesn't seem dangerous, just..." As the murmur puddled around her, Clara felt a mix of pride and fear. She had acted on instinct, yes, but at what cost? Hours turned into days, and whispers about the man she had turned away filled the cafe. "He's been in trouble before," one customer claimed. But then another voice cut in, "Yeah, but I also heard he volunteered at the youth center." Clara felt her heart twist. How could someone so full of potential end up standing before her that day, looking lost? This man had glimpses of brightness buried deep within, and she had let fear overshadow it. As the rain poured, she could hear name after name whispered in her direction. He's supposed to be dangerous. But as Clara reflected on it all, she began to wonder if she had misjudged him. The thought gnawed at her each night as she lay in bed, heart heavy with regret. One evening while cleaning up after closing, Clara overheard a pair of customers gossiping. One said, leaning in conspiratorially, "He's been at that community center helping kids." That single mention hit her like a brick. Could she have turned away someone who was trying to make a difference? As the night wore on, Clara's curiosity grew stronger. She had to know more. Days later, she found herself wandering down the street to the community center where the whispers had guided her. The building stood bright against the gray sky, laughter spilling from within. Clara pushed the door open, the warmth wrapping around her like a shawl. Inside, kids were running, playing games, their laughter echoing off the walls. And then she spotted him, the man she had refused. He was kneeling beside a group of children, animatedly sharing a story. The way he engaged with them was captivating, his earlier tension seemed to melt away. Clara felt drawn in, her heart swelling with mixed emotions. This was a man who could bring joy, a man not so different from her own mission of fostering community. She took a cautious step forward, but a wave of uncertainty washed over her. What would she say? Would he even recognize her? Suddenly their eyes met. Time seemed to still for that brief moment. He paused mid-laugh, surprise flickering across his face. "Hey," he exclaimed, waving her over. "Yeah, she stammered, nervousness creeping in. "I wanted to see what you were doing." He smiled, the warmth of his expression catching her off guard. It's great here. These kids have so much potential. The sincerity in his voice struck Clara, and within seconds she felt layers of tension drift away. I'm really sorry for how I treated you that day. His eyes softened, and she could see a flicker of understanding behind them. You're not alone in that. We all have our fears. Inspired by his openness, Clara ventured deeper. He took a deep breath, pausing as if he were gathering his thoughts. After everything I've been through, I realized I didn't want my mistakes to define me. With each word, Clara felt a connection growing between them. He was not just a man defined by his past, but someone striving for a brighter future, not just for himself, but for the lives he touched. Days passed and Clara continued to visit. She helped out at the center, organizing events and getting to know the kids. Each interaction uncovered something new about him, a kindness buried beneath layers of judgment. They laughed together, shared stories, and bonded over their shared passion for helping others. As their friendship blossomed, Clara began to learn more about his struggles. He was working hard to turn his life around, but the ghosts of his past lingered in the shadows. At night, she could occasionally hear whispers of his previous life echoing through the community. A voice would murmur. It pained her to hear people talk about him like that, to dismiss all of his efforts with a single word. She understood the weight of judgment. It wasn't just a passing comment, it held the power to define a person. One evening, as they cleaned up after an event, Clara decided to confront him. I've heard the rumors about you and they just won't stop. He sighed, running a hand through his. Honestly, it's hard. Some days I feel like I'm fighting a battle I can't win. You're doing so much good here, yet everyone is fixated on what you've done before, Clara replied, frustration bubbling. You can't let their words hold power over you. For a moment he looked at her, his vulnerability laid bare. I wish it were that easy. Some days I doubt myself. In that instant, Clara recognized the weight of his struggle, a battle not just against his past, but against the world's perception of him. She felt a swell of empathy, the urge to strengthen him. You're not who you were. Their eyes locked, and she could see the flicker of hope behind his uncertainty. She felt that same hope igniting within herself, a shared understanding that transcended words. As the weeks went by, their connection deepened, solidifying into a bond strengthened by shared struggles. Together, they organized events that brought the community together, featuring games, art projects, and life lessons that instilled hope in both the young and old. Throughout it all, Clara could see the man growing into his shoes, stepping into a role he was meant to play. And yet, the whispers didn't seem to fade. They changed but never disappeared. At one of the events, Clara overheard someone say, "Why would we trust him?" Clara felt a surge of anger bubble up inside her. How could they still be seeing him through a lens of the past? Driven by that anger, she stepped forward, heart pounding. You're judging someone based on their past without seeing what they're doing now, she said, her voice steady but fierce. Some of the crowd looked taken aback, but others nodded slowly, beginning to see the potential change in the air. Clara turned to the man beside her, a shared understanding racing between them. He didn't have to fight alone anymore. They would confront the shadows together. Over time, the tide began to shift. People started to speak of him with more respect, their perceptions slowly altering. The whispers around town evolved into a newfound curiosity, a willingness to learn more about the man who had faced his past head-on. Clara watched as the man welcomed those who wanted to know about his journey, sharing stories of struggle and triumph, inspiring hope in others. With every story shared, a little more light began to seep into the corners of their community, washing away the remnants of doubt. Months passed, and a gala was organized to celebrate the successes at the youth center, honoring people like him who worked tirelessly to uplift others. Clara stood by his side, pride radiating through her. As he stepped onto the stage, he looked overwhelmed yet ready to speak. Thank you for being here tonight. When I stood in front of the cafe and felt those judgmental eyes on me, I felt lost. Clara felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She had seen the evolution of a man who refused to be defined by his mistakes. She could see it in the uplifted faces around her, the residents who had chosen to listen and learn rather than judge. As he continued to share his journey, the audience was rapt, completely absorbed. They were no longer just listening, they were engaged, committed to driving change alongside him. When he stepped down, the applause shook the room, and Clara felt a rush of joy. The whispers had turned into a chorus of awe, voices echoing around the dynamic community they had collectively grown into. After the gala, as the evening wound down, the man turned to Clara, his face illuminated by a soft smile. I don't think I could have done this without your support. She smiled back, filled with warmth. You fought your own battles. You proved that people can change. As they stood there, sharing a quiet moment in the chaos of the aftermath, Clara realized that they had both transformed, not just in the eyes of the town, but also within themselves. The road ahead would still be filled with challenges and whispers, but they had learned that change begins with understanding, empathy, and facing fears. And as they looked into the future together, Clara knew one thing for certain, that sometimes the most significant shifts happen when we dare to challenge our preconceptions, and in doing so help others rise from the shadows into the light. The journey continued, a vibrant tapestry woven from moments of doubt, resilience, and unwavering hope. The bell jingled above the cafe door, a cheerful sound that usually lifted Clara's spirits, but on that rainy Thursday afternoon, it hardly registered. The swell of her own anxious thoughts drowned it out. Outside, the world was gray, water spilling from dark clouds, and people hurried by with heads down, seeking refuge from the storm. As she wiped the counter, her eyes drifted to the window, watching the raindrops race each other down the glass. That's when she noticed him, a man stepping through the door, drenched and disheveled. His hair was messy, clinging to his forehead, and he wore a tattered jacket that looked like it had seen better days. Clara asked, forcing a smile, though her heart began to race. "Yeah, I'll have a large mocha, please," he replied, his voice gravelly but tinged with a strange charm. She turned away to make the drink, but an unshakable instinct crept in, sending a chill through her. Glancing back, she noticed the other patrons were looking at him too, their expressions ranging from curiosity to discomfort. Something felt wrong. His eyebrows shot up, surprise shifting to confusion. "I just can't," Clara replied, her pulse quickening. The kitchen grew silent, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. He exclaimed, his voice rising, rich with anger. "I understand that, but my gut is telling me to be careful," Clara said, meeting his gaze. The atmosphere shifted, tension spilling over like the rain pooling outside. For a moment she felt the collective breath of the cafe being held, energy electrifying the hushed whispers and startled glances. "Fine," he scoffed, stepping back. With that, he turned and stormed out, the door slamming shut behind him. The bell's chime echoed ominously. A wave of murmurs rose through the cafe, mingling with Clara's anxiety. She could feel their eyes drilling into her, their judgment weighing heavily. Someone asked incredulously. Another voice chimed in, Clara's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, her heart racing. Had she made a mistake? Sure, her instincts weren't wrong, but what if he was harmless? She'd always prided herself on her gut feelings, but now she felt a nagging doubt. What if she had misjudged him? The hours that followed felt like an eternity. Each customer that walked through the door reminded her of the man she had turned away. She scrubbed the counter in a daze, her thoughts a whirlwind of self-doubt and fear. Then over the next few days, she heard whispers about him drifting into the cafe. "He's dangerous," one customer said. Another voice chimed in, contradicting, "No, he's been helping kids at the community center." Every story pushed her further into a storm of indecision. Who was he? Should she have given him the benefit of the doubt? Clara couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that she needed to confront her choice. It was eating her alive. One weekend, while wandering through the park, Clara spotted him again, a flash of tattered hair and worn jeans. He stood under a tree, tossing a ball with a group of kids, his laughter infectious. The sight drew her in, a blend of relief and apprehension filling her. He wasn't just standing idly, he was engaged, alive, and it looked like he was making a difference. The kids seemed to light up around him, and Clara felt a strange warmth spread in her chest against the cold breeze. But then she heard a nearby group of adults whispering, "Isn't that the guy from the cafe?" Clara could feel blood rushing to her cheeks as embarrassment heated her skin. Why couldn't they see past the surface? Why was everyone so quick to judge? She'd been one of them just days before, and it haunted her. Before she knew it, their eyes connected again. He caught sight of her, and for a brief moment, surprise flitted across his face. He hesitated before waving her over, his warm smile unfurling in the air. "Hey," with her heart pounding, Clara stepped forward. "I just wanted to see what you were doing," she stammered, her nerves buzzing. He replied, gesturing to the kids. She asked, genuine curiosity flowing. He shrugged, passion igniting in his voice. "After screwing up so badly, I didn't want my mistakes to define me." As he spoke, Clara felt a wave of understanding washing over her. Here was a man trying to rise above his past, proving that change was possible. Suddenly, the walls she'd built around her judgment began to crumble. "I'm sorry for how I treated you," she said, the words pouring from her heart. "I didn't take the time to understand." He nodded, a glimmer of empathy shining in his eyes. "It happens, we all have those moments." And just like that, they were no longer strangers. Clara felt an unfamiliar lightness in her chest. Together, they shared a thrilling sense of possibility, a tether of connection starting to pull them closer, a dance of goals and dreams intertwining. Days turned to weeks, and Clara found herself returning to the community center more frequently. She began volunteering, organizing events with him, laughing over shared glances and whispers of encouragement. Each moment exposed her further to the struggles and joys of the kids they were helping. But with every triumph came the shadows of his past creeping back into their lives. She had seen murmurs grow louder among patrons who had known of his history. "Why should we trust him? He's just in it for himself," they'd say, leaning across tables, spreading doubt like wildfires. Each word felt like a knife as Clara watched him grow. She could see it in his eyes when they held conversations, that shadow of doubt creeping back in, trying to taint who he was becoming. He began to feel the weight of people's perceptions pressing down on him again. One evening, as they worked late in the center, Clara approached him, concern knotting her stomach. He turned, a hint of exhaustion coloring his features. "I can see you're struggling with what people say," she began, cautiously finding her words. "You've come so far and you're doing so much good." "It's hard," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. Some days I feel like a failure. You're not a failure, she countered, her voice steady. You're redefining yourself, and that's powerful. Let your actions speak for you. As he absorbed her words, Clara saw a flicker of determination spark in his eyes. It gave her hope that maybe he could rise up, stand firm against those shadows. Weeks rolled on, their bond deepening further with shared purpose, unified by a mission to help their community. Clara found herself cheering at school events, organizing fundraisers, and pushing past the negativity that tried to envelop them. But then disaster struck. Rumors erupted out of nowhere, flowing through the town like a raging river. He was spotted in a questionable part of town, one gossiping patron shouted in fury. A knot tightened in Clara's stomach as she overheard the conversations, aghast at how quickly perceptions shifted. Panic gnawed at her. How could they twist the narrative so easily? They had fought so hard to build trust, and now it felt like everything was unraveling. One evening, the weight of it all surfaced when they were prepping for a big event. He was distant, words unspoken hanging heavy in the air. Clara dared to break the silence. He looked up, his gaze a mix of weariness and resignation. Yeah, I heard too. Don't let it win, we'll push back. We always have, Clara said, frustration flaring within. People can change, he muttered, his eyes falling to the ground. What if it never stops? Emotion bubbled up, her heart aching for him. You've done so much good, and we can't let fear define us. But as they stood together, Clara noticed something shift in the air. They were both grappling with the specter of uncertainty, a fragile tension holding them in place. Just as she opened her mouth to reassure him, her phone buzzed. She glanced at her screen and felt the color drain from her face. It was a message, urgent and alarming. We need to talk. Her heart raced as chills curled through her. What could it mean? The weight of the words pulled her under, and Clara realized that the shadows they had fought so hard against were closing in again, threatening to consume everything they had built. He asked, noticing her sudden stillness. I don't know, she said, swallowing hard. As she stared at the screen, a knot twisted tighter in her gut. The darkness was whispering again, and she knew that whatever came next would change everything for both of them.